meeting of the Air Quality Committee. General Statute Section 138A-15 mandates that the chair inquire as to whether any member knows of any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to matters before the commission. If any member knows of a conflict of interest or appearance of a conflict, please so state at this time. Okay, hearing none. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve. Did everyone have a chance to take a look at those? Are there any changes to those minutes? I think there was only one typo to Commissioner Solomon's name in the June 15th minutes, but other than that, it looked okay. Do we have a motion to approve, let's say, the first set of minutes, the May 12th minutes?
So moved.
Commissioner Deerhage? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Lazorick? Thank you. Since we have 2 members joining remotely, we have to do a roll call vote. So, Commissioner Bailey?
I approve.
Commissioner Carter is not here yet. Commissioner Davis?
Approve.
Commissioner Deerhage?
Yes.
Commissioner Lazorick?
Yes.
And Commissioner Monist? Yes. Motion carries. And now do we have a motion for the second set of minutes from June 15th?
So moved.
Is that Commissioner Deerhage? Okay. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Lazorick, thank you. And another roll call vote. Commissioner Bailey?
I approve.
Commissioner Carter is not here. Commissioner Davis?
Approve.
Commissioner Deerhage?
Approved.
Okay. Commissioner Lazorick?
Approved.
Commissioner Monist? Yes. Okay. Minutes pass. We have no concepts today, but we do have an action item on the NOx SIP plan rules. And is that Brad Nelson who's presenting?
Thank you, Chair Rada, committee members. This is the same set of rules that you approved, I guess, at the May meeting. We had discussions with EPA afterwards, and they requested a couple of changes that we wanted to include. And so we wanted to go ahead and reapprove the rules through the committee here. Here are a few of the acronyms that will be in the presentation here. And I guess the same background, I guess, as we provided in the May meeting. You know, the SIP call was promulgated in October 1998. It was to reduce ozone transport and precursor emissions from upwind states to protect the states the downwind states. In May 2005, the EPA promulgated the CARE rules, the Clean Air Interstate Rule, to reduce NOx and SO2 emissions, and they incorporated the EGUs and large boilers that were in the NOx SIP call. The CARE rule was remanded by EPA or by the courts, and the EPA came up with the cross states air pollution rule that they enacted in 2011. And although the cross state air pollution rule replaced CARE, the NOx SIP budgets that were included in the original NOx SIP call were not included in the cross-state air pollution rules, so we have to put them back into our rules now. So that's what we're doing now. The changes in the previous approved rule that you had in May, we had a procedure set in place where the facilities would petition the department for use of alternative monitoring. The EPA asked that we have specific alternative monitoring methodology in the rule. So what we've done is we've the two approvable methods are using the historical Part 75 data and to develop NOx concentration and flow factors, and the other one is to use EPA methods 1 through 4 to determine the flow rate, and method 7 or 7E determine the NOx concentration and develop factors using that data. So what we've done, we made changes in 3 of the 4 rules that we had that you approved. The biggest changes in 1424, where we removed the procedures for petitioning for alternative monitoring, and we included the new language that lists the actual approval methods that they can use, the historical data factors or the test data factors. We also changed the word in the definition of large non-EGU in 1401, and we include 1418 in the set of rules that apply statewide. The impacts are similar to what they were at the May meeting. There was one facility that was using AP42 emission factors to determine their NOx emissions. They will now have to take their historical data and come up with the factors from there. So we've included some additional costs, and they're included in that $43,076. The staff dollars did not change, and the benefits from using an alternative method are the same as well. So like I said, the rules were approved in May. We're here asking, I guess, to ask you to reapprove the rules, the revised rule text, and we hope to go to the EMC in September and proceed to public hearing. I don't know, does anybody have any questions?
Commissioner Deerhick.
Thank you. Why was 1418 added? Those are new facilities, right?
Right. They should have been included. It was a typo. It was included in the original rule, and during the APA formatting, you have to strike out the first word, and it never got added in, so it was just an oversight.
So it was EPA's intent to allow new facilities to have alternative monitoring as well, or alternative methods, I should say.
Well, that only applies to NOx rules within the state. That's the applicability section. That's not included in the large non-EGU section, which is 1424. So all that does is just say that these NOx rules, but not 1424, but the other rules will apply as needed.
Do you think that's consistent with what EPA's intent was there?
I'm sure that's fine. I think it was just an oversight when editing the text and not.
So I just see if they have something else you want to ask about. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Bailey, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any, thank you.
Commissioner Monist?
Yeah, and a couple questions just to refresh my memory on
Sure.
some of the details. Can you remind me, is the alternative monitoring just for the non-EGUs or for the EGUs also?
It's just for the non-EGUs.
Just for the non-EGUs.
And if they are covered by a federal rule that requires them to operate the CEMs, they will continue to use these CEMs.
Okay, and the EGUs already use CEMs?
That's correct. They'll be following
Okay.
Part 75.
Okay. And can you just give me a refresher on the difference between the CEM and the alternative methods?
Sure. The CEMs, measure the concentration of the NOx in the stack, and you either use a flow meter to determine the flow rate, or you use method 19, which you measure the fuel intake into the source, and then you develop the flow rate from that, and then the flow rate times the concentration gives you the mass emission rate. What we're doing now is we're taking the alternative methods. You would look at what's your fuel into the boiler, and then you would look at what your NOx concentration is during that time, and then you would use that time period that you're using that fuel and the flow rate for that to determine what the mass emission is. For the other, you're going to use test data, and you're going to measure the NOx concentration and the flow rate during different fuel usages, and then apply that for those periods that you're using whichever fuel.
And do you think for the non-EGUs that now would be allowed to use the alternative monitoring, do you think all those that would be able to make the switch likely would, or might there be reasons why they might stick with the continuous monitoring?
Well, they actually already have switched to alternative monitoring already. They used, we have an alternative method rule in the 1400s that they used to use these other methods. There's three facilities that are using the historical data, and then one that was using AP42 emission factors. And so now that one, they will no longer be able to use the AP42 emission factors. Will now have to either do the test or the historical data and come up with factors.
So, to make sure I understand that, so they already have switched from the continuous monitoring?
Yes.
Okay, so that it's not creating a change for them, except for the one that's using the alternative method that's...
Right. The only thing they'll have to do is they will have to report their ozone season emissions, which there's a little bit of cost involved in doing that. But they're already reporting monthly emissions to the division, but they do it more on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other, Commissioner Deerhake.
So, but this was a Federal Register and an EPA action that triggered this particular set of amendments, is that right?
Right, the alternative monitoring, and yes.
And what year did those amendments come out? I'm just curious.
I believe they were last year, like January of 2020.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion? I'll just state what the motion is, and maybe someone will let me know at that point. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the proposed rule revisions to 15A NCAC 02D.1400 to proceed to the EMC for approval to proceed to public hearing?
This is Commissioner Davis. I move
Thank
approval.
you, Commissioner Davis. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
This is Commissioner Bailey. I will second the motion.
Okay, Commissioner Bailey, thank you. Second. Roll call vote. Commissioner Bailey?
Approve.
Commissioner Carter is not here. Commissioner Davis?
Approve.
Commissioner Deerhig,
A reluctant approval.
Commissioner Lazurick,
Yes.
and Commissioner Monist.
Yes.
Motion carries. That's our last action item. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. We have one informational item that is quite lengthy, so I believe that's for Andy Strait. So I'm sure you all saw already, there's about 60 slides that's very information dense. So if we could hold questions to the end of the presentation, that would probably help. And also, if Mr. Strait, if you would like to join us at the table, that's totally okay too.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it'll be good standing, so. Let me just do a sound check. Commissioners Bailey and Davis, can you hear okay? Hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And so today I want to provide an update on the work on the regional Haze rule for the second planning period. This work started actually in December 2017, so it's about 3.5 years worth of work. Let me see, where's my pointer here? They advanced the slides. There we go, found it. This is the presentation overview. I thought I'd just talk about the regional Haze rule requirements briefly in our planning process. Spent a little time reviewing the monitoring data that we've collected for going back to the year 2000 for our Class 1 areas, and then talk about we have to establish what we call regional progress goals for 2028. We use air quality modeling to do that, so touch on that a little bit. And then one of the core elements of our SIP is developing what we call the regional progress analysis or source selection analysis to identify sources for potential additional control. So I take you through that, and then we have completed our federal land manager consultation process, and I have a slide kind of highlighting a couple of the major comments that they provided, and then I'll review our schedule going forward. All right, so this is another one of those programs that's acronym intensive, so I'll skip over these, but if you want to refer back to them later, they're there. The regional Haze rule was amended in 2017, and the original rule, as well as the revised rule, applies to what we refer to as the mandatory federal Class 1 areas. These are national parks and wilderness areas where we have an obligation to improve visibility to natural conditions. So we do two things we track. One is the 20% most anthropogenically impaired days to reduce those to natural conditions, and then no worsening of visibility for the 20% clearest days. States develop SIPs every 10 years. We develop progress reports every 5 years to track this. It is an iterative process. And our second round SIP is due at the end of this month for the planning period covering 2019 through 2028. Our previous SIP, the first one, covered the period 2008 through 2018. So we coordinate this planning. All the states are part of regional planning organizations that coordinate their SIP development work. And North Carolina is in the Southeast States Air Resource Managers, our regional planning organization. And the project under that is called VISTAS for regional Haze. So we have the 10 southeastern states listed here on the slide, along with Knox County, Tennessee, represented the local agencies in the southeast, and the Eastern Band and the Cherokees represented the federally recognized tribes. This slide shows we have 18 Class 1 areas in the VISTAS region, plus 6 in states that border the VISTAS region. For North Carolina, starting on the coast, we have Swan Quarter, which is managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then moving to the western part of the state, we have the Great Smoky Mountains National Park that's managed by the National Park Service. And then the U.S. Forest Service manages 3 of the wilderness areas, which are Joyce-Kilmer, Slip Rock, Linville Gorge, and Shining Rock. And we share planning responsibility with Tennessee for Great Smokies and Joyce-Kilmer Slip Rock. This slide is showing the management team for the VISIS project. We had 3 committees, a technical committee, a coordinating committee. As time went on, we had representatives from all the states on these committees and the local agency and tribe. So these kind of blended together, and then we all kept our directors informed, and they made the policy decisions on a lot of things. So throughout the project, a lot of coordination, lots of meetings, a lot of information has been developed over the past 3.5 years through this group. So we did hire a contractor team through a competitive bid process to support us on the emissions inventory work and the area of influence work, as well as the photochemical grid modeling. And these are just all the deliverables that the committees worked with in reviewing, and then this information was used by each state to develop their SIP. We wrapped this work up in February of 2021 this year. Now I'd like to talk about the monitoring data that we have for our Class 1 areas. So the monitoring network is called Improve. The monitors are operated, there's monitors in almost every Class 1 area, but not all of them. For North Carolina, Joyce Kilmer Slickbrook does not have a monitor, so we use the Great Smokies monitor, the monitor in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, to track visibility improvement for the wilderness area there. But the monitors are operated about every 3rd day, and so we take 20% of the most impaired days and 20% of the clear days they operated to track from year to year. And so this tracking metric amounts to about 20 to 24 days of observations. And they do change from year to year, the days that account for the 20% most impaired and the clearest days. And then some metrics that we use in the regional haze world. Visible range is pretty straightforward. This is the distance in miles or kilometers at which a dark object can be viewed against the sky. But the improved monitor data is the monitors are reporting PM species of impaired visibility or scatter light. And that's recorded in units of inverse megameters. The regional haze rule has what we refer to as the deciview haze index, and as a logarithmic scale, we can convert the monitor data to a logarithmic scale and then express it as a deciview. So about 1 deciview is what the human eye can perceive as a change in visibility. This slide is showing the monitoring data for 2000 through 2019 for Great Smoky Mountains National Park for the 20% most impaired days. The left-hand axis is the Y scale is in inverse megameters, the light extinction. Right-hand side is the standard visual range. The black squiggly line is the visual range in miles. And the way the PM species that are measured are in the legend here, starting at the bottom. In case Rayleigh is actually natural light scattering. So there's nothing we can do about that. But ammonium sulfate is in the yellow, ammonium nitrate is in the red, organic carbon is green, and then we have light absorbing carbon and some other minor contributors of visibility impairment that we track, these monitors measure. So sulfur dioxide emissions react with ammonia, the form of ammonium nitrate. Nitrogen oxide emissions react with ammonia, the form of ammonium sulfate, and then ammonium nitrate. Got those 2 terms mixed up. But sulfate, or SO2 is highly more reactive with ammonia than nitrate. So the ammonia is going to react with the SO2 before it reacts with the nitrate. But as we go down, reduce the sulfur dioxide emissions, then we're going to see probably some more nitrate creeping up. And you see a little bit of this going on here on the right-hand side of the chart for 2017 and 2018, is where you see the red bar increasing a little bit. But for 2019, those nitrate levels went back to about 2015 levels. So it's jumping around a little bit. We're not sure what's going on there, but we'll look at that for the next planning period. But overall, we're seeing about a 28, if you take the first planning period from 2008 to 2018, we'll see a visible range improvement of about 28 miles for Great Smokies for the most impaired days. For Linville Gorge, similar pattern here. We've reduced the emissions, SO2 emissions in particular, had tremendous progress here, and it's resulted in tremendous improvements in visibility in our Class 1 areas. So we're looking at about an improvement for the first planning period of about 30 miles in visual range. And then same story for Shining Rock. Shining Rock's visible range improved by 36 miles from 2008 through 2018. Swan Quarter, it's almost a 40-mile improvement from, we did, the 2008 data was incomplete, so I used 2007, and from 2007 through 2018, it's about 39-mile improvement. So doing a great job at improving visibility by mainly controlling the SO2 and NOx emissions. The NOx emissions are coming down. And then another way to look at the monitoring data is we took, this is showing the 2 bars for each of our Class 1 areas in the southeast. And the Class 1 areas that are in the little red box are North Carolina Class 1 areas. And then the right-hand bar is showing the 5-year average for the 20% most impaired days for sulfate and nitrate. And this is showing the 5-year average looking at the period 2009 through 2013. And then we look at the period for 2015 through 19, which is the right-hand bar. But what you're seeing here is just kind of comparing nitrate and sulfate. Sulfate is still the dominant species, particularly for North Carolina Class 1 areas. And then this, turning to the emissions trends for North Carolina, this is showing trends from 2011 to 2017, and then our projections to 2028 that we use to model our regional progress goals. So this is for showing a reduction of about 65% in SO2 emissions for North Carolina from 2011 to 2017, and we're projecting an additional 8% reduction. And the major sources here are the fuel combustion sector for power from the power sector and the industrial sources. But for NOx, we also see a significant reduction. Going from 2011 to 2017, it's a 37% reduction. We're projecting another 25% 2028. But the sources are different. The highway vehicles, which is the blue, and the right above it is the dark red is the off-highway. Those are the major sources of NOx. The power sector is the orange bar at the bottom, and those are continuing the decline. So what we conclude from a review of the monitoring data is that ammonium sulfate, at least for the second planning period, ammonium sulfate is still the primary pollutant contributing to visibility impairment, and it's coming from the power and the industrial sectors, mainly coal combustion. And then NOx emissions are continuing to decrease, but we're seeing this nitrate fraction increasing a little bit in recent years. So we'll need to look at that. Well, let me move on here. So now I'd like to talk about our modeling for a little bit. So we did perform photochemical grid modeling to establish regional progress goals for 2028. The most recent platform, 3.5 years ago, that we had available to us was EPA's an EPA platform using the CAMEX model, and it was a 2011 base year with a projection year of the 2028. And so at the time we had, due to the time and resource constraints, we just didn't have time to build a new modeling platform with a more recent base year. So we discussed with EPA, and they said, yeah, that's fine. For SIP planning purposes, this platform is fine. And it does provide comprehensive emission source sector coverage. So this is a modeling domain. We start with EPA's platform, which is CONUS refers to the continental U.S. The 12 refers to 12-kilometer grids. We windowed that down in the red box to the VISTAS modeling domain to improve model performance and the reduced computation time. One of the important things about this modeling approach, it's looking at, we call it the relative response factor approach, and so we're modeling concentrations for Class 1 areas for 2011, and then we're modeling it for 2028 based on our projection year emissions. We're taking the difference for each pollutant species, a percent change in emissions, and then we're applying that to the average, 5-year average of the monitoring data for each improved monitor in the various Class 1 areas for the period 2009 through 2013. So that's how we calculate the projected regional progress goals. Emissions inventory development, we focused on updating the point source sector. EPA's projection year inventory for the platform included the Clean Power Plan for the power sector, and we wanted to update it. North Carolina, we actually redid the projections starting with the 2016 base year to account for some closures that had taken place and whatnot following EPA's guidance. And then one of the things we do when we're doing this modeling is evaluate the performance in the model. And so for 2011 model concentrations, we compare it to the improved data for each Class 1 area. And following EPA's guidance, we look at various things, doing these comparisons, a lot of different kinds of statistics, plots, spatial and plots. And we do this comparison for ozone, fine PM, and visibility. And overall, the model performance was deemed acceptable for the purpose of developing a regional haze SIP. And EPA was involved with developing the modeling protocol, reviewing the results, and they're all on board with, and they agree with that our modeling was sufficient for developing our SIPs for the second planning period. Okay, I'm going to switch to some charts now. We call these glide path charts, and this is something that we have to include in our SIPs. And I'll walk you through this one and for the Great Smoky Mountains for the most impaired days, and then I'll kind of go quickly through the others because it's a very similar pattern. So one of the things we have to do is construct the pink line, which is the glide path. And then we also have to construct the green line, which is the natural conditions, and we follow EPA's procedures for doing these things. And the pink line, the procedure is we start with the 5-year average, 2000-2004, and we draw it to 2064 where it meets the green line, and that represents natural conditions. One of the things and then the blue diamonds represent actual monitoring data, and the brown line is the 5-year average. So we're tracking well below the glide path with respect to our actual monitoring data. The purple line is our modeling, and so we start with 2011 and go to 2028. So we're modeling a regional progress goal for Great Smokies of about 15 decibels. Now, if you take that 2028 value, 15.03, and draw a horizontal line over to the pink line, you'll see we're about 20 years ahead of where we need to be relative to the glide slope. So we have a similar pattern for Linville Gorge for the 20% most impaired days. Here we're also about 20 years ahead of where of the glide path. Similar pattern for Shining Rock. Here we're 25 years ahead of the glide path. And then for Swan Quarter, we're about 15 years ahead of the glide path. So all the reductions are, really that we've achieved so far, are really helping us get ahead of the curve here in terms of improving visibility in our Class 1 areas. I mentioned the clearest days earlier. This is I'll just add this slide that each chart is for each of our 4 or 5 Class 1 areas, the double Great Smokies and Choice Kilmer are doubled up on one chart. But basically, the pink line is the baseline conditions, and we need to show no degradation in the 20% clearest days. Same, the blue diamonds are the monitoring data, the brown line is the 5-year average, and then the purple line is our model concentrations. So we're definitely showing no degradation of the clearest days, so we're good there. Okay, now I want to talk about the reasonable progress analysis. One of the things we have to do for our SIP is go through a process to narrow down. We can't analyze every source for its potential control to reduce emissions to figure out what the improvement in visibility would be. So we have to go through this process to narrow down and identify sources for a 4-factor analysis. And these are 4 factors that are included in the Clean Air Act. And so we ask the sources to identify basically any technically feasible controls, and then analyze those controls for their cost, time necessary for compliance, look at the energy and non-air quality and environmental impacts and the remaining useful life of the source. So this is all according to EPA guidance performed on the 2028 projected emissions. Okay. So one of the tools that we use, or metrics, is what we call the area of influence analysis. So the first thing, we have to look at all sources. So the first thing we did is we looked at county level emissions for the different sectors. Point here, on-road, non-road, what we call stationary. We did look at power sector separate from point, and then we looked at prescribed fires. So we take the county level emissions for all the counties in the modeling domain, and divide it by the distance to each Class 1 area to come up with what we call the Q over D, quantity over distance. And then we wanted to factor in the meteorology, because wind direction has a lot to do with whether the emissions are hitting Class 1 area or not. So that's called residence time in the EWRT quotient there, or weighting factor. So we look at, and to calculate the residence time, we use a model called high split. And we do back trajectories for 72 hours. It tracks the wind patterns going from the improved monitor back across the grid cells, and we can figure out how much time it resided in each grid cell. And then we weight each of those back trajectories based on the concentration of the sulfate or nitrate at the improved monitor. So this is the way to factor in the meteorology to the emissions. And so we take all that information for each Class 1 area, sum it up, rank it. And for North Carolina Class 1 areas, it's clearly the point source SO2 emissions were the major contributor to our Class 1 areas, which is accounting for over 50%, 50 to 80% of the potential contribution. So then we do the same thing for all of our point source facilities. We look at the facility level emissions divided by the distance, weight it with the EWRT, rank those up for each Class 1 area, and then we all review this. And we did this collectively with the VISTA states. And of course, with Tennessee, since we share a Class 1 area, we coordinated our planning with them. And we settled on, for North Carolina, we settled on a 3% contribution for sulfate and nitrate to a Class 1 area. And what we're doing here is narrowing the list down for doing what we call social apportionment modeling. This is a tool I'll describe in a little bit. We didn't have it available to us for the previous planning period. It's a fairly recent development in photochemical grid modeling that's been really helpful. So this is just showing, I'm not going to cover this in detail, we did a lot of back trajectories. This is showing the list of facilities that had more than a 3% AOI contribution for sulfate to North Carolina Class 1 areas. So, and the Class 1 areas shown on the right-hand side, none of them had, okay, this is for sulfate and nitrate combined, okay. So the Psat modeling, what this allows us to do is within CAMEX, we can tag a region or source or group of sources and model the contribution of that region, source, or group of sources impact on each Class 1 area relative to the total impairment to get us on. And this is a really nice tool that we did, and so I'll get in a little bit more detail, but we think it's a much more better way of evaluating source impacts on visibility. So we did a lot of tagging as a process by identifying groups of sources for figuring out their contributions. So we looked at SO2 and NOx, statewide SO2 and NOx emissions for each of the VISTA states, and then grouped for each of the 3 regional planning organizations that border vistas, we looked at their total emissions. Then we did this for EG point and non-EG point, and then boundary conditions for the modeling domain. And then as a result of the VISTA states reviewing all the sources from the AOI results, they identified an additional 87 facilities to tag to identify better understand their contribution to impacts on Class 1 areas. Many of those were in the VISTA states, but some were also outside of the VISTA states. Okay, so all this tagging allowed us to develop these charts. So what this is showing is this is for Great Smoky Mountains National Park for the 20% most impaired days used in 2028 projected emissions. It's showing the light extinction contribution. So we have the bars on the left-hand side are all for sulfate, and the 3 bars on the right are for nitrate. So looking at the bars on the left-hand side, we have total sulfate, and then the colors in that bar for total sulfate, if you look at the legend, it starts with Alabama at the bottom, and you work your way up through the VISTA states alphabetically, and then move into the regional planning organization, CENRAP, LICO, Mainview, and then the boundary conditions. But if you add up the total EGU and the EGU and the non-EGU sulfate, it accounts for a big chunk of the total sulfate, but not so much with the total nitrate. So we think that the nitrate has got to be coming from mobile sector, on-road, non-road, and perhaps some other stationary source fuel combustion that is not permitted, basically. It's in our what we call the non-point source inventory. So we see the same pattern, and interestingly enough, CENRAP, and which is to the west of the VISTA states, and LADCO, which is kind of northwest and a little bit north, are pretty significant contributors to the total sulfate and even total nitrate for the Great Smokies. Similar pattern for Linville Gorge. We have the same story here. Shining Rock, it's the same story. And Swan Quarter, very similar story. Okay. All right, so once we got all the Psat modeling results, Vista States got together, we went through it, everything, ranked everything up for each Class 1 area, and decided to use a threshold for selecting facilities for a 4-factor analysis. And we settled on a 1% or greater contribution for nitrate or sulfate, kind of looking at them separately. So for North Carolina, of the 5 facilities that we tagged, Psat's phosphate and Domtar paper company had an impact of greater than 1% on Swan Quarter, and then Blue Ridge Paper Products had an impact of greater than 1% on Shining Rock. The other 2 facilities, which are Duke Energy Marshall and SGL Carbon, both of those were less than 1%. None of our North Carolina facilities had a 1% contribution, above a 1% contribution for sulfate or nitrate on any Class 1 area outside of North Carolina, which was great news. So we ended up, North Carolina actually, we had identified 16 facilities in 10 states that had a contribution of more than 1% for sulfate. And 7 of those facilities were in the VISTA states and 9 were in the non-VISTA states. And if you recall, looking at the emission reductions, it just mentioned North Carolina's done a great job of reducing its SO2 and NOx emissions over the last few years, particularly with the Clean Smokestacks Act and some other things. And so it's not unexpected that we have other states who haven't taken the lead on that. Excuse me. Excuse me. To see them showing up as being major contributors to North Carolina Class 1 areas. I'm going to go through, these next 4 slides are just showing the facilities we identified for 4-factor analysis in VISTA states and outside of VISTA states. I'm going to jump over those that are here for reference. The green highlighted ones are the North Carolina facilities. Okay, one of the things we learned, this is the first project where we did an AOI and a Psat analysis for the same facilities. We compared those results, and what we've learned from this is that the AOI, we use a 72-hour back trajectory to weight the factor in the meteorology. But sulfate can last weeks and travel hundreds and thousands of kilometers. And so the AOI approach using the back trajectories just isn't going to capture that, where the Psat modeling does. So we regard the Psat modeling to be a much better tool for understanding individual source contributions to visibility impairment in Class 1 areas. Okay. 4-factor analysis. So we asked Blue Ridge Paper Products to conduct a 4-factor analysis on 2 coal boilers and for SO2 for 2 coal boilers, and then they have a Riley Bark boiler, which is also co-fired with coal. And they found 2 technologies that were technically feasible for SO2 control. One is referred to as ultra-low sulfur diesel, and the other one is dry sorbent injection. And so they evaluated the cost following EPA procedures and came up with a range of cost effectiveness values that are pretty high for SO2 control, as shown in this slide. So we concluded that, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but additional controls adding the ultra-low sulfur diesel or DSI is not cost effective. In 2017 through 2019, Blue Ridge reduced their SO2 emissions by 93%, and that's to comply with the 2010 1-hour SO2 standard. And we also developed a source-specific SIP for them, which is included in our regulatory SIP, which incorporates their allowable SO2 emission rates, which demonstrated compliance with the NAAQS. So that's all good. So we factored that into our decision. They already reduced these emissions, and we were asking them to see if they could do more. And the reason why they have a 1% contribution in Shining Rock is because they're so close to Shining Rock. Some of these facilities, because they're so close, they're probably going to be on the radar, on the list every time, for future planning periods. But the 93% reduction they got prior to doing this 4-factor analysis actually improved visibility by 0.46 decibels or 2.8 miles for Shining Rock. Not so much of an improvement in Great Smokies, a little bit, but not as much as Shining Rock, so that's all good. Okay, Domtar has 2 boilers, and the number 2 Hog Fuel Boiler burns high sulfur mill gas from the pulp and paper process. And they determined that wet scrubber and DSI injection, or DSI, they were technically feasible. So they costed that out and came up with a cost effectiveness for wet scrubber of $3,660 and DSI of over $22,000 per ton of SO2 reduction. Let me back up a minute. One point I want to make here: there's a large capital investment for both of these options, over around $14 million, a little higher. So, considering the large expense for the wet scrubber control, we decided it was not justified for the small visibility improvement. At the bottom of the slide here, we're looking at about a 0.03 deciview improvement, or 0.16 mile improvement for Swan Quarter, and it's just, you can't even kind of perceive that with the naked eye. They also have a Hog Fuel Boiler number 1, which we found out that they converted to, they used to burn high sulfur mill gas in it, but through a project at the plant, they disconnected that and now just use it for low sulfur fuel. It's basically a backup unit, and they didn't even operate in 2010 or 2020. So we determined that existing controls demonstrate reasonable progress. For PCS phosphate, kind of similar story like Blue Ridge. They have 3 sulfuric acid plants. They did look at several different additional controls that were found not to be technically feasible for the acid plants. In 2017 through 2019, they did install a dual absorption process with a cesium catalyst on each of the 3 plants, acid plants, under an EPA consent decree, and reduced their SO2 emissions by 37%, which didn't increase visibility a whole lot. That's Swan Quarter, about 0.02 deciview is what we estimate, or 0.11 mile. So again, we concluded that existing controls demonstrate reasonable progress for this one. Okay, the 2028 reasonable progress goals that I discussed earlier are not very federally enforceable, but the long-term strategy that we include in our SIP to support getting to 2028, those goals is federally enforceable. And so what we've included is federal and state control programs that were included in our 2028 projections. And then, of course, those are building on all the controls that we had included in our first round SIP. We've demonstrated that we completed the 4-factor analysis for some facilities. There's these 5 additional factors. I'm not going to read them here, but we have gone through all these and written about them and complied with them in our SIP. Okay, so what we've learned is that our facility landscape continues to change. We've even, since we've done our modeling, we've learned of shutdowns that are reducing SO2 emissions further. Additional controls are being installed. But overall emissions for all our pollutants are continuing to go down, and it's resulting in significant improvements in visibility levels, or I should say regional haze levels, in our Class 1 areas. We're well ahead of schedule of our glide path for improving visibility. Sulfate for the second planning period we think is still the dominant pollutant. And we acknowledge that there's some changes going on with nitrate. Now nitrate is unlike SO2. We know SO2 is coming from coal combustion, basically, primarily. NOx emissions are coming from all kinds of fuel combustion sources, point, mobile, and so we need to understand, and those 20% days are shifting from the summertime to other seasons, spring, fall, winter. So we need to do our research to figure out what is contributing to that nitrate fraction that's starting to increase in Great Smokies and Swan Quarter. All right, almost done. We completed our Federal Land Manager consultation process on June 5th, and they had 60 days to review. We gave them our pre-draft SIP. And in general, they were very complimentary. All 3 FLMs, they said it was great information, well organized, they understood what we did. And we did have conversations with them, kind of sharing information, because initially they, for example, the National Park Service would have liked to see us do a 4-factor analysis for a whole lot more facilities, and particularly Duke Energy facilities, so looking at NOx control. But after they saw our work and understand what we were doing, they kind of narrowed it down and said, well, we'd really like you to look at Marshall closer. So we will research that for the next planning period, but we need to get our SIP right now wrapped up and submitted to the EPA. And we've told the Park Service that we're happy to work with them in the future on that, and as soon as we get our SIP in, we'll start doing that. Prescribed burning is an important issue, as you might guess, with the U.S. Forest Service for managing their landscape, ecosystem management, and whatnot. So there's a provision in the regional Haze rule that allows states to take that 2064 endpoint in the glide slope and bump it up to allow for prescribed burning emissions. We didn't think that we needed to do that for this planning period because they're not a big contributor. But the Forest Service is just commenting that, can you look at that going forward, and we will. And of course, we're committed to very, very supportive of prescribed burning as a land management tool, and we work closely with North Carolina Forest Service and Department of Ag and managing air quality impacts associated with that activity. So I think the last thing here is covering our schedule. So we hope to take our draft SIP out to comment the week of July 19th. We've still got some work to do to address some EPA comments. We have to summarize the FLM comments and write a response to that. So we're working through that. We plan to take it out for 45 days. This document, the main narrative, is close to 400 pages. We have 8 appendices that have lots and lots and lots of pages. So we're going to start a 45-day comment period, and then 31 days into that or so, we'll hold a public hearing. And hope to wrap the comment period up by early September with a goal to submit the SIP by October 29th. Now, if you recall, we had a deadline at the end of this month to submit our SIP, and we're not going to make that. And most states are not. And part of that is that with the change in administration, EPA has been slow in getting us guidance on some things, and so we're trying to, and we'd like to incorporate all that before we take the SIP out. The notice, we're trying the best we can, but at this point we just need to, get it done and move forward. Okay, and then I can't have a presentation on regional haze without a picture, so this is showing this is Look Rock, and in the Great Smokies, and showing a picture from 1998 and 2017. Now, the term here, worst days, is we're referring, I forgot to mention this, but one of the changes from the regional haze rule, when they amended in 2017, we used to have to track the worst days, which included natural and anthropogenic emissions. But under the 2017 amendment to the rule, they asked us to just focus on those days that are associated with man-made impairment, mainly. And so, but this is for the worst days, and we're seeing, a 30-mile improvement over this time period. Much of that, as you've seen, occurred in our first planning period. All right, I think that's the end of the presentation. My contact information, I would like to acknowledge my staff who've been working on this diligently, and it's been a haul. So, thank you for your time. Questions?
Let's go to the folks who are joining us remotely first. Commissioner Bailey, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you for the presentation, and really appreciated all those graphs.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Davis?
I do have one brief question. First of all, the improvement is tremendous. You guys need to be commended. Everyone who's been working on this, it's really impressive. My question is, in the planning or the looking forward, the graph was pretty linear. Is there any concern that there's going to be at some point a slowing down, a diminishing return, or leveling off of those projections as you get closer to natural conditions? Because I just didn't see that in the graphs you presented. And are we really expecting this consistent linear decline over the next, 40 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is Randy. That's absolutely a possibility. We will need to track that. And so, in the way the rule works, we just have to demonstrate our due diligence and go through the process that I just explained. And if we find that, we are slowing down in terms of our progress, but we've done the four-factor analysis on, the facilities that we think are the major contributors or the source sectors, but it's too expensive, that's okay. But we'll certainly, keep tracking this and see how it shakes out. But it is a possibility. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Director Oberzinskis.
If I could just add a quick remark to add on to what Randy said there. I think it's really important to note, Randy noted it at some point during the presentation, those 2028 projections on the reasonable progress line are likely high, right? Because we know since we did all of that modeling of additional shutdowns and reductions that were not taken into account. So if anything, that 2028 data point on those graphs that are showing that we're going to be 20 years ahead of schedule will likely be better than what we're showing here from the modeling analysis.
Right,
Correct,
yeah,
Randy?
that's right. One of our approaches to this, and I think a lot of states are doing this, and one of the reasons that originally this SIP was due in 2018, but they delayed it 3 years, EPA did in a revised rule, and that was to allow states to account for emission reductions, so it would be associated with implementing controls that comply with the various national ambient air quality standards, ozone, PM2.5, for example. And so, we kind of track what's going on with reductions because of other regulatory programs and factor that into the analysis, and that's where we've really gotten our big gains. It's not from the four-factor analysis, but we've really gotten the big gains from these other regulatory programs. And of course, we're looking at carbon reduction options now in North Carolina, which, for 5 down, we can't put that in our SIP because we don't know what it looks like yet. But if it comes to pass and we can calculate the impact on that reducing visibility and pairing pollutants, we'll certainly take credit for that. Yeah.
Commissioner Lazaruk.
I also wanted to commend the progress and also thank you for teaching me what a decibel is. That might be the coolest term I've learned. And this is just a case where a picture is worth 1,000 words. I mean, that really, thank you for adding that at the end. It really enables us to visualize the progress. It's fantastic.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Commissioner Monist.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It really brings me back when I was working for an economic consulting firm. We had a contract with the National Park Service where we were doing focus groups to try to put an economic value on the value that people place on reduced haze at national parks. So if you ever have to do economic analysis of that, let me know. I did have a question. So I got a letter from 22 stakeholder groups that echoed some of the concern from the National Park Service about the number of sources and had some other concerns as well. And I noted that your public comment period, your time to respond to public comments when you get the comments and when the final goes to EPA is less than 2 months. And so I'm wondering, with some of these concerns out there and questions about a very technical topic, is that really a meaningful public comment period if you don't have much time to respond before you have to get the final into EPA? And how do you plan to handle the comments that come in?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on how many comments we get and how much time it takes to respond to them. I think we're familiar with all those concerns, and we've been working on those. And so, but that's fair. We may have to adjust that submittal date. We'll see. But right now, we've set a target date of at the end of October to submit a final to EPA. So, but yes, fair enough. Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I just blanked on my other question. You said that, in response to the comment from the National Park Service about wanting to see more sources evaluated, you said you'll do that in the next planning period. When is that next planning period?
Yeah, so it starts, that period will cover the next 10-year period, so 2029 through 2038. So we'll have to submit the next third planning period, so in 2029. However, we have a 5-year progress report due in 2025. So we'll start looking at this stuff after we get the SIP in. And we'll should by then have 2020 improved monitoring data. Because we just don't, right now, when we started this work 3.5 years ago, we didn't have 2018 and 2019 monitoring data. And we got 2017 about a year into that effort. So it's a moving target, and it takes so much time to do the modeling and do all the planning and everything up front and do all the technical work. New data is coming in, and it's like, okay, well, that's why we have this iterative process, so we can consider that new data. But, we're really trying hard to understand what we can do now, to keep on track with improving visibility in our Class 1 areas. But so we'll have that 10-year period coming up, but we'll do a 5-year progress report. We'll summarize the monitoring data and start looking at it. So in our consultation with the National Park Service, we are very committed to working with them, and starting having some conversations around how to approach that. And we have some thoughts, and so absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and I'll just add with an anecdote from those focus groups. We had the pictures of the different haze variations, and a lot of the people in the focus group said, yeah, it's great to improve visibility, that's important, but also I really care about the air that I'm breathing, and can you please tell me about that? And we would have to say, well, no, that's not the purpose of this, sorry. And I think, your point towards the end is really well taken, that these rules interact with each other, and a lot of the gains in haze are also from the other regulatory programs. And I saw that kind of mirrored in the letter from the stakeholder groups, that concerns about human health impacts of air pollution, of course, are kind of brought into this conversation about haze. So I would just, appreciate you thinking about those connections, as we go into the public comment period.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Commissioner Deerhick.
Thanks. I do have a number of questions, so do you mind? Please interrupt me if I'm taking too long. So, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk with you ahead of time, Randy. Some of these questions might could have been answered, but thank you so much for this huge level of work. I know it's a big task to take it on and to your staff as well.
You're welcome.
So I think Commissioner Davis's question was excellent, and with all the modeling and forecasting tools that are in place, I'm surprised that we can't, in some fashion, extrapolate out for a few more years to see if we are going to level off. That would be, I think, a useful exercise. I'm surprised EPA doesn't require some type of projection such as that.
They require a projection for the end of each planning period, is what they require in the rules. So, that's what we do. It doesn't mean that we can't look past that, and, to a certain extent we are. Go ahead, Mike.
I would add that the error bars on the emissions projections beyond that horizon year that we're looking at are quite large. I mean, we've learned from over 2 decades of doing this for both the NACs and for a public welfare standard like this, that there's one thing that we're good at, and that is not getting the future emissions projections perfectly correct. We usually overestimate emissions in the future. And we see that likelihood here as well, given that we're on the cusp of a total transformation of the electric generating sector potentially, and we're just starting to realize the benefits of some of the federal engine standards with fleet turnover that will benefit the NOx part of this equation. So it certainly can be done, but I think the reliability of that projection gets called into question.
I think it would be useful, especially on the graphs to flag at what point in time the Clean Smokestacks Act rules went into place, but also just as important, the 2011 TVA settlement, because that made a significant impact, I believe I understand, from the Tennessee and the Western emitters on Shining Rock, Great Smoky Mountains visibility.
Yeah.
I really think it's important to note that, because the message needs to be is a combination of in-state and out-of-state sources that are impacted. And I go beyond that, especially talking about the role of reduced nitrogen or ammonia. You're going to be, and you've seen that, I think it's the LAGCO and CINRAP sources, regions are the central.
That's right.
The central and the, what's it, the lower.
Great Lakes.
The Great Lakes.
Great Lakes, yeah.
Are significant sources. So it's an interstate transport issue that we've really got to keep focus on as well. And the CINRAP states have known, and I worked on this years ago, CINRAP states have known for years that ag field burning, agricultural burning, is a big source of ammonia to reduce nitrogen. I don't know what kind of progress they've made on that, but that was a key point for them in their regional haze planning back in the early 2000s. And so I definitely look into the ag, not just prescribed burning, but ag field from out of state, ag field burning and ammonia contribution to that.
Okay.
I think to your list of acronyms, you should add NHX, reduced nitrogen, because you're showing that it is becoming a more prominent player in the PM5, secondary PM5. I've been stressing for a number of years through the Air Quality Committee the role of ammonia in our state's particulates, and been assured that the ammonia emissions coming off of animal operations is not contributing. But what I'm seeing here is, as you're showing the profile of as sulfate goes down, the profile of NOx is going to go up. But also, as NOx is going to go down, the profile of reduced nitrogen or ammonia is going to go up in our state, particularly from a deposition standpoint, ecological impacts, critical load impacts for nutrient deposition. So I do think that as soon as you can get started on looking at the NHX or the reduced nitrogen role, will be really important not only for PM5 formation, but also ecologically from a deposition standpoint. And we talked about this and wrote about and studied this during the Smithfield Agreement studies that were done at NC State back finishing as early as 2003 has been identified as potential problems. I am curious on the choice, this is an EPA-supported approach to use CAMAX versus CMAQ model. Can you tell me briefly about that? Is CMAQ not an appropriate model for this plan?
It could be used. It doesn't have the source tagging capability. It may have now, but at the time I don't think it had the source tagging capability. And it's the model of choice that EPA has used for regional haze as well. Yeah, so, and there's probably more reasons I could find them if you.
So on page, on slide 34, there's a bullet that talks about facilities. And are those facility names available? Bullet 2.
Yeah, so this will be on our set. Yeah.
Can you give us a snapshot of what those might be, some of those?
Hundreds of thousands of them.
Oh.
Tens of thousands anyway. I've probably already, so yeah, we did this for each class 1 area for each facility in the modeling domain. But, and we have those spreadsheets.
You were talking about the Vistas modeling.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're referring to the second bullet, yeah, those rankings.
And
Yeah.
why the choice to combine sulfate and nitrate versus treating them independently?
We just looked at it kind of together. We didn't want to leave, there were kind of the two pollutants associated with fuel combustion, so. Yeah.
I also want to echo the remark about understanding that Park Service and Forest Service and more sources are needed. I know that the criteria give you a choice of selecting individual sources or groups of sources, mobile sources and area sources. And so all that we are seeing are 5-point sources, is that correct?
Well, that's what we narrowed it down to. We said it was, the first bullet up there, and second, I guess, we actually looked at county level emissions for all sectors. And point SO2 was the major contributor, so. I mean,
Why not look at, maybe I'm taking this in the wrong context, but why not look at coal-fired electric generating units as a group of sources? Why not look at all of them as opposed to choosing one, maybe two? I don't know how many are in that 5.
Well, we kind of did that in the sense that for the ones that did not make the threshold, that were below the threshold, we went ahead and looked at how well they're already controlled. And for like all the UGUs, even the Park Service agreed for SO2, they're all well controlled. And really when it came down to NOx, they just said, well, is there something we could do at Marshall? And I think they misunderstood the control level for the 3 units that were controlled was selected, not catalytic reduction. They indicated it was 30-35, but when you factor in their combustion controls, it's actually 60-65%. So, but they were below our threshold. I mean, some, kind of have to draw the line somewhere. And the Psat modeling was saying that their impact, was not. I was kind of surprised, but it was below 1%. I thought it'd be above 1%, but I don't know if that answers your.
So what is the division's response to the interest groups' call for more point sources being included?
Well, you want to take that, Mike, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can start. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about this anyway, because I wanted to acknowledge, following Commissioner Monis' comments about the comments received thus far, that we've had a good dialogue with the National Parks Conservation Association, who led the drafting of that set of comments, to make sure that we're fully explaining the technical process and the technical analysis that we have undertaken, and not only used kind of the primitive screening approach that's on the screen right now, but took that next step of using an advanced methodology, using the modeling, the Psat modeling, where you can physically tag the emissions and determine their precise contribution to visibility impairment in each Class 1 area. Not just single sources, but groups of sources, or counties, or source sectors, or regions, as Randy has really well explained. So I think working through that with them is something we want to continue to do during this public process, to make sure they understand that some of the suggestions that are contained in that letter would be taking a step backwards in terms of the technical rigor of the analysis that we would use by only using, for example, an AOI analysis. But what we've learned from the Psat modeling and the tagging and all of that modeling is that even if you if you had a magic wand and eliminated certain sources, would it have a perceivable difference in improving visibility in our Class 1 area, i.e. would it have a perceivable difference, a deciview, if you will? And it's far from a deciview impact. It's in the hundredths place impact. So And then, then if you get to just hypothetically talk about more practical things, like, well, what more could they do if the magic wand doesn't exist? And you look at what they have in place now, SCRs and wet scrubbers and ESPs. I mean, there aren't additional controls technically for a lot of those sources. And so we're continuing to have those discussions to make sure that everyone understands what we're looking at. And that can help inform their next set of comments.
So one of the chemicals used in SCRs is ammonia, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So are we looking at the ammonia emissions from those SCRs?
The ammonia emissions, the full inventory is included in the technical analysis. I can't speak to any sensitivities that were done early in this process to ammonia emissions, but I can recall in Vistas 1, when I was kind of in the role that Randy's in now, I can speak to what the sensitivity showed then, but were there any additional sensitivities to ammonia done recently?
No.
We relied on some of those prior ones that showed that there wasn't a particular sensitivity to reducing ammonia emissions in terms of improving visibility. But that's something we have to continue to look at moving forward in the next planning period. And we will.
Yeah, I think from a chemistry standpoint, the modeling where it is reflected is basically the focus is on SO2 or NOx because they're forming an ammonium nitrate. They're reacting with ammonia, so it's easier to focus on controlling those pollutants than, the ammonia.
So what I'm gathering and looking is the small role of in-state sources, the small role they can play in reducing the visibility impacts turns to looking out of state. Is that right? So is our neighboring, or not even just immediately neighboring?
You're correct.
So
You're correct. There were 16 non-North Carolina sources that contribute greater than 1% to visibility impairment in our Class 1 areas. There were 3 North Carolina sources that contributed over that threshold, and just barely over that threshold. So, yes, I think that says a lot about North Carolina's approach to protecting the NACs, the primary health-based standards, from which we've always thought that sooner was better for protecting public health, and we're reaping the co-benefits from that approach in this program here.
And so how do we use the SIP and the VISTA's collaboration to negotiate with those states other than turning to a SIP call?
That's an excellent question. So per this process, we sent every one of those states that house one of those sources a letter indicating that we believe a 4-factor analysis should be triggered for those facilities. What those states do with that 4-factor analysis in their SIP is an approvability issue between that state and EPA. We'll see what their final SIPs look like.
But we do have mechanisms. There are mechanisms and statutes for pressing other states to take action, because we've been the target of one of those in the past, at least I know myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Last comment, and thank you for all that. Last comment is I do think that choosing a holiday weekend for a comment period is a poor choice of dates, and I would encourage you not to do that. September 2nd through 7th is Labor Day weekend.
Oh yeah, we'll add some time for that. Absolutely. To be honest, when I put that in the slide, I didn't think about that. So thank you, Commissioner Deerhake. But definitely we look at that. Yeah. So good comment.
Just it was when they actually started.
Oh, is that how it was written?
It was the close, the range of dates where we would close the comment period was potentially that week.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And I caution you, it could, depending on what we hear from EPA on a couple of things, it may be another week later than what I put in the slide, but we're working on it, trying to get it out.
So our commission does not have this as an action item. It's not something that we normally vote on. You're providing it for information purposes.
Yes, ma'am. Just this is such a significant effort. It's one that we want to get out there and talk about because of the tremendous progress that we're making. You can physically see the cause and effect relationships between the reduced aerosol mass loading in the mountains and at the coast, and the increases in visibility in the data, and with your own monitors, all of our eyes when we go to the mountains and go to the coast now, we're all reaping those benefits. So that we definitely wanted to get this before you because it's a significant amount of work and a significant I think achievement for the state of North Carolina, being ahead of schedule. The gap between the glide slope and the reasonable progress line is significant, and that gap is much greater in our Class 1 areas than the other Class 1 areas. We didn't show that here today, but we'll have that in the SIP as well. They're a lot closer together for all the other Class 1 areas in the southeast. The slope of our line is greater than the glide slope, which also indicates the rate of progress that we're projecting between now and 2028 is also greater than what is required. So we're excited about it. And so yes, it was only an action item for today. And just, if I may, Madam Chair, just for one more second, I just want to thank the staff for a tremendous amount of work over the last 4 years on this topic, and Randy for his leadership as being a leader in the regional group, the leader of the technical analysis group. This is leading work in the nation technically, and people are looking at the state of North Carolina and emulating this approach. And many states have already told us that they're waiting for us to submit our SIP, so then they can copy our work. So just to brag a little bit on our staff, I'm really proud of the team. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
One follow-up question to something the director said, mentioning that if you could wave a magic wand and get rid of entire source categories, it wouldn't make a significant difference in the overall modeling. Is that true for coal-fired EGUs? Yes, and so you see some of that in some of the data we showed here today, even like with Blue Ridge paper, which we already identified as a contributor over the threshold that we selected in this analysis. I think Randy showed that the 94% reduction in SO2, which was significant, a significant reduction, resulted in less than 1 decibel improvement at the nearest Class 1 area. Is that it? Yeah, that's it right at the bottom.
For Great Smokies.
For the Smokies. Yeah. And then...
it was really PCS, I think.
And about a half a decibel at Shining Rock, based on Blue Ridge Paper's analysis. So that gives you a snapshot, right? And if a 5,000-ton reduction very close to a Class 1 area, what level of improvement it will get, then look at what's left at any of those other remaining sources, and then the distance, the greater distance away as well, you can kind of extrapolate that. But we have all of this in modeling, and it's, like Randy said, there are dozens and dozens of spreadsheets that contain detailed data.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to ask exactly without seeing the modeling and only being able to write so quickly as you speak, so thank you. And then, sorry, I'm about to lose my voice. For the 4 factors, the federal factors that you use for the analysis, is it correct that those don't include replacement, but in the future replacement of facilities would be considered?
Go back. Where did I think it referred to the remaining useful life of the equipment.
Yeah, I think it was slide 33.
Yeah, slide 30. There we go. Oh. There we go. So the remaining useful life, and I could talk a little bit about this. So when we did the 4-factor analyses, and we actually put these on our website because people were asking for them, the drafts. EPA's reviewed them, gave us comments. They've been revised to address EPA's comments. Some of the significant comments that EPA provided, and for the wet scrubber technology, for example, EPA had updated their cost manual, and it was out for comment. Well, and they got comments, but they hadn't finalized it. So, the facilities were following the, final cost manual, not the new one. Well, in midstream, EPA said, well, you got to follow the new one, and then they finally issued it last month or something like that. So anyway, the
comment was that we should use a discount rate for the capital recovery factor of 3.25%. And facilities were looking at using something that was, post-COVID, and kind of looking at something more higher, around 4.25%, I think. That's what at least Domtar and Blue Ridge were looking at. PCS provided costs for the work that the controls they installed for the consent decree, but that really wasn't part of the four-factor analysis. So the other thing they said, for remaining useful life of the equipment, 30 years. And that's referring to the control device or the control method. So they were using, I think, 15 for the scrubber and 15 or 20 for DSI. So the capital recovery factor was revised based on that to bring down it would actually bring down the annualized cost. But and then there were some other details that were associated with the change or the update in the cost manual that they wanted us to address. So we did that. But does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Sure.
I was just wondering because when we get to slide 55, it includes the consideration of 5 additional factors.
Oh, yeah.
Is how it mentioned specifically source retirement, which I kind of had equated to useful life and replacement schedules.
That's different. That's looking at, back up here. I think that's looking at things like when we're doing the projections, we're looking at facilities that have been retired. And if there's any facilities that are going to retire during the planning period, generally we don't include them in our projections unless we have some assurance that they're definitely going to be retired, either through a consent decree or a special order by consent, or it's in their permit, or they're going to have the permit. Otherwise, we don't include it. So, and that's, there have been a couple of things that have happened that we didn't include that occurred since we did the modeling that, like CPI, Southport, and Roxborough shut down. The permit's been revoked. So, reducing SO2 emissions for both of those facilities. So, would you like me to speak to the rest of these, or?
That's okay. You've been up there for a while, unless you.
Well, I'm good. I'm good.
I think Commissioner Carter is now on the line. Commissioner
okay.
Carter, do you have any comments, questions? Okay, hearing none. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, thank you.
I'm not on the committee.
Yes.
But I would like to ask a question on that last bullet point there on slight increases in nitrate concentrations observed at some Class 1 areas in recent years. Future, and in parentheses, future research needed to identify source sector contributions. Would that be something similar to breaking it out of the question that, or concern that Commissioner Deerhake had on the ag piece, to specifically get the nitrate piece out of the sulfur piece? Are we trying to find a model for that? And if so, what are other states doing if we're going to be the leader in that? And what would you suggest if other studies are needed?
Yeah, so the first thing we'll start with is look at the 20% most impaired days. We'll look at the nitrate contribution, the contribution for all the PM species for, probably starting with 2016, 17, 2018, 19, and 20 when we get that. And then we can run, one of the things we can do is just run the high split model for each year for those days, and for days leading up, to those days, to get an understanding of what the wind direction was and what the wind patterns are across, counties, states, regions, whatever, to figure out where that contribution might be coming from. That's just one piece of the puzzle. But what we're seeing is that those 20% most impaired days are shifting from the summertime to the fall, winter, and spring. And some of them are even shifting to more heavily at the beginning January time frame. So then the next question is, well, if we look at the back trajectories, are they coming across, are they showing wind patterns that are bringing emissions from the power sector or some industrial source? Or is it, if it's not related to that, is it in North Carolina? Is it outside of North Carolina? We just don't know. But we do know that mobile and non-road emissions are big NOx sources, not just for North Carolina, but they're also for the whole country. And so we're just trying to, that's one step in terms of looking at this. Ideally we'd like to do additional modeling, but it's very expensive. I've been talking to EPA about this, saying, we need to understand, for us to go back and ask a source to control their NOx emissions, we got to show that they've got a reasonable chance of contributing to visibility impairment on one of those 20% most impaired days, or one or more of them. And so help us, this is expensive stuff, the research and model. So let's get set the stage and kind of get a collaboration going to do the research on this, because Mammoth Cave in Kentucky has shown a larger than a NOx signal or a nitrate signal that's higher than those Class 1 areas. And some of the thought would be that, well, you're reducing SO2, so there's more ammonia that react with NOx that create nitrate, but we're not seeing that nitrate signal increasing in every Class 1 area, just a few. So we just don't know yet what it is, and so we need to. So part of our consultation with the Park Service is to start this thought process and put a research plan together. We'll work with Tennessee, our partners there, and then also other states if they're interested, and then of course EPA will be part of it too. But does that answer your question, sir? Yeah. Okay.
So, could someone unmute, whoever the host is, could you unmute Commissioner Carter? He's on the line and I think he wants to ask something. Okay. Commissioner Charlie, you should be unmuted now.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
No, actually, I just wanted to make sure, I don't have any specific questions right now. I just wanted to make sure we were connected though. No, I thought it was a good presentation.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Strait.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Commissioner Lazaruk, do you have something that you'd like to offer?
So this is an announcement related to tomorrow's meeting. Tomorrow's meeting of the Environmental Management Commission has already been noticed to be in hybrid form. That includes options of both in-person and remote attendance, with members, staff, presenters having been strongly encouraged to attend in person. The meeting notice provided for limited availability of seating for the public, and that the meeting audio and presentations will all be broadcast by WebEx. Given that Tropical Storm Elsa is predicted to make landfall in the state tomorrow with significant impacts expected, and in the absence of the chair, as vice chair with this announcement, I'm strongly encouraging members to attend the meeting remotely and asking that staff be provided WebEx panelist links for members to facilitate the remote participation. Meeting will otherwise take place as scheduled. Members of the public are encouraged to observe the meeting via the WebEx link that was contained in the original meeting notice.
Thank you. I didn't want to forget to pass it over to you. So, Director Brzezinski, sorry to leapfrog over.
No problem. Nothing further today, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, the next Air Quality Committee meeting is scheduled for September 8th. Council Reynolds, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to Vice Chair Lazaruk's announcement, if I may, that I understand that the ground floor hearing room, in case anybody misses this announcement or the announcement that will be made at the Water Quality Committee, the ground floor hearing room will still be open in case someone attends anyway, but as Dr. Lazaruk said, strongly encouraged to do it remotely. Tomorrow's agenda is fairly light, and the one action item you were scheduled to take, or you're scheduled to take up, was already going to be presented remotely already. So just wanted to add that to it.
Okay. Well, I don't think there's anything else now, so meeting adjourned.